Hello everybody, you're listening to the Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rhylight Zone for a short story and or some poetry. We play local unsigned and or independent music, and we catch up with Twangling Jack Ford over in the Oak Shed for a weekly album review. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And we are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your podcast platform of choice. It all helps. You can also reach out to me here at the studio by dropping me a line on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain at wickhamsound.org.uk. And I'm particularly keen to hear from performers, musicians, poets, people with MP3s to share local arts news, etc. Don't hesitate to get in touch. So this week we are chatting to local musician Dave Cannings, who is a classical guitarist. But before we chat to him, we're going to head over to the Rhylight Zone to catch the latest instalment of a short story by myself, Dane Cobain. And this is called A Mulher Branca. A Mulher Branca. The apartment was strewn with empty bottles. There was nothing new there. Demetrio was a heavy drinker, and Christiana was an enabler, though she didn't see it that way. The life they'd built together was Hobbesian, nasty, brutish and short. That night they'd had another argument. It had started, as usual, over nothing. Demetrio had misplaced his bottle opener and Christiana was too high to help him find it. She'd never been much of a drinker, but one of Demetrio's friends had introduced her to pills and she'd soon learned that they took the edge off. That meant that their arguments were largely one-sided, with Demetrio barking in his girlfriend's face as she tried desperately to calm him down, except for those times when she was too high to try. After the argument about the bottle opener, Demetrio had pulled on his favourite leather jacket and stormed out of the apartment, smashing a bottle of Bud against the living room wall as he went. Christiana watched as shards of glass tumbled down onto the uncarpeted floor, while the yeasty residue of what was left of the beer dribbled inexorably down the wall towards the plug socket in the skirting board. Then she patted down her pockets in search of a baggie. She had a little gear left somewhere. Demetrio had rules about what she could and couldn't do on nights like this, when he'd left her in the apartment so he could drink himself into oblivion at Yannick's, the dingiest heap of a bar in their dingy heap of a town. Christiana wasn't allowed to leave the house without him, not even to grab a loaf of bread or to score, and when Demetrio was at Yannick's, he expected her to clean the house, or at the very least to throw some bleach around and to sweep up the broken glass. And so she made a token effort to tidy up as best as she could and then retreated to the bedroom. The bed hadn't been made, but that didn't matter. Why bother making it when she was just going to crawl back into it anyway? But first she had one last job to do. She raided a secret stash that she kept inside a hollowed out copy of the Bible and laid out all of the baggies on the dressing table, which was cluttered with brushes, makeup, bottles and overflowing ashtrays. Sweeping the detritus aside, she cleared a space the size of a magazine and set to work. It was tedious and time-consuming, unpleasant but not quite as bad as picking up cigarette butts and emptying the tobacco out to make a smoke. She opened up one baggie after another, slitting them open with her ragged fingernails, and then tapped out whatever powder residue she could. She counted the bags out in her head, reaching 14 by the time that she hit the last bag and tapped out the milligram or so of powder that was inside it. Then she took out her driver's license and cut the powder into a line. There was as much dust and grime as there was powder, but that didn't matter. She got enough of a hit for it to take the edge off. Then she retired to her bedroom, where she collapsed onto her bed like a sack of potatoes being thrown over a farmer's shoulder. The downers were working. She was asleep within a couple of minutes. When Christiana woke up, she wasn't alone. "Demetrio," she murmured, "is that you?" There was no reply, but somehow she knew that it wasn't. She'd always been proud of her ability to sense vibes. It was a required skill, one that had kept her alive. And the vibes were off. When Demetrio got back from the bar, there was usually a subtle reek of alcohol fumes, smoke and women's perfume, as well as a sense of pent-up aggression and wounded masculinity. Christiana didn't see auras, but if she'd been able to see Demetrio's, then she was pretty sure it would have been red with anger. If she'd had to put a colour on this one, she would have said that it was white. Her eyes opened, slowly at first as she fought against the gown that had gathered in her sleep. The room was a blur, and so was the presence that had joined her. She reached up and rubbed her palms across her face, clearing the detritus of sleep. In the stories and movies, that was when the apparition would have disappeared, leaving her wondering whether it had ever been there in the first place. But this was real life, not a horror movie. With her eyes cleared, she could better see what had woken her up. She had a visitor, a woman in white, a Mulher Branca. The woman was ageless, her face hard to define as though Christiana was looking at her through fog. Her clothes were a white so pure that they seemed to shimmer in the darkness, the streetlights on the other side of the window staining it a faint yellow because they weren't as pure as the woman's dress was. It might have been a wedding dress, but then again it might not have been.
Christiana was still lying back in bed, propped up on a crusty pillow that had needed replacing for years. She moved her head slightly to watch the woman's progress as she floated towards her. The woman's legs didn't move because they didn't need to. She passed through matter as if it didn't matter, and Christiana supposed that to the woman in white it didn't. She felt no fear, and she asked herself why that was. There was just something that told her that the apparition meant her no harm. It wasn't there to hurt her, it was there to watch. She fell back to sleep with the woman in white watching over her, and had dreams of Elysian fields and peaceful walks through the Portuguese countryside. The following morning, Christiana woke up with a clear head for the first time in as long as she could remember, though she could still feel the drugs and her little booze in her system. She could smell booze too, but it wasn't coming from her. Demetrio was passed out in the bed beside her, snoring heartily and sweating out something that smelled like Singaverga. She climbed out of bed while Demetrio was still snoring beside her, then made herself a cup of instant coffee and went to drink it on the balcony. Afterwards, she jumped in the shower, and she was brewing her second when Demetrio emerged from the bedroom, his eyes red and blurry from the previous night's excesses. Christiana murmured. Demetrio, you look like death. I feel like it too, Christiana, he said. He took the coffee from her hands, and she wondered whether he thought she'd made it for him or he just didn't care. Either way, the end result was the same, although at least his black moods were a little better in the mornings. It wasn't until the early afternoon that his cravings started to kick in, and whether he satiated them or not, she was usually the one who had to foot the bill for them. It's a beautiful day, Christiana said. It looks it, Demetrio replied. Perhaps I'll take my coffee on the balcony with you. Give me a couple of minutes and I'll brew another one, then I'll come and join you. Demetrio grunted, and Christiana matched her actions to her words. She glanced down at her watch as she walked out onto the balcony to join him and saw that it was almost 11 a.m. For Demetrio and Christiana, that was early. You were again last night, she said, sitting down on one of the wooden chairs that they like to smoke on. You know that, right? I know, Demetrio replied, lighting a cigarette and taking a drag on it before passing it across to her. I'm sorry, something came over me. Something always comes over you, Demetrio, Christiana said. You can't keep on doing this. You'll end up killing me. Or myself. Exactly, Christiana replied, and my heart couldn't take that. Despite everything you've put me through, I still love you. And I love you too, Demetrio said. That's why I'm telling you this. What? You're going to think I'm crazy, Demetrio said, lighting a cigarette of his own and taking a deep drag from it. He looked over at Christiana, who was staring back at him with an eyebrow raised. Go on, she said. He sighed. I've been having these dreams, Demetrio said. I keep getting visited by this thing. It looks like me, but I know that it isn't. It's something else, something bad, and it talks to me. What does it say? It says that it feeds off the bonds between people, Demetrio replied. It's trying to break the two of us apart. Why bother? Christiana replied. If we keep going like this, it just has to wait. Some time passed, weeks at first, and then the months rolled by. Christiana got clean, and then she relapsed again. Demetrio spent less time at Yannick's, but that just meant he spent more time sitting around at the house in his Y-fronts with a bottle of beer in his hand. He started a new job, tossing a wrench around at an illegal chop shop, but he got fired after a couple of weeks for pinching parts in his lunchbox like Johnny Cash in one piece at a time. Mostly, life just continued, as it always did. It was still Hobbesian, but with a Henry James twist. Demetrio was still having his dreams, and Christiana had rediscovered religion. One evening, as summer rolled into autumn, the two of them were enjoying a rare moment of relative normality. Christiana was high and Demetrio was drunk, and the two of them had collapsed into a heap on the sofa. They'd flicked lazily through the channels for a while, switching from the news to the music channels before settling in for a rerun of Exorcist II, The Heretic. It wasn't great, but that wasn't the point. It gave them something to stare at while Demetrio lifted an endless procession of brown bottles to his lips and Christiana nodded out. The lights were off and the volume was up high. Neither of them had said a word since the opening credits, but then the noises began. Did you hear that? Demetrio asked. What's that? I don't know what it is, Demetrio said. That's why I'm asking you. Junkie, he growled, slapping her several times in the face to bring her round, hitting her just a little bit harder than he needed to. Listen, Christiana, do you hear it? Listen. Demetrio muted the television and the two of them fell silent. With nothing to get in the way of it, the noise was much more apparent. It was human, but only just. A clearly female sound that formed a wordless drone, a line of capital A's like a place marker in a document. Ah. It wasn't a scream, but nor was it a whisper. It was the kind of noise that someone might make at the dentist when they were asked to open wide. What is it? Christiana asked. I don't know, Demetrio replied, but it's not coming from the TV. Go and look. Well, I'm not going. Demetrio looked at her for a moment, but Christiana stared right back at him. He scowled. He spat. Fine, I'll go, but I'm getting another beer while I'm up. There were no arguments or violence that night, but after they finished their movie and dragged themselves through into the bedroom, the noise disappeared, to be replaced by a scratching noise from outside the window. It sounded like the branches of a tree scraping against the glass, but there were no trees on the other side of it. Demetrio got up a couple of times to go, and he poked his head out the window both times to see if there was anything there. There wasn't. But when the two of them woke up in the morning, Christiana gasped and pointed a finger at him. You've got scratches all over your back, she said. Did I do that? When? Demetrio replied. We haven't had sex for months. Then who did? Christiana asked. Have you been sleeping with someone else? No. I thought not, Christiana said. You drink too much. You can hardly get it up. Demetrio balled his hands into a fist and raised his right hand, but Christiana was too tired to flinch back and she just sat there. He unballed his fist and lowered it again. Hitting a woman who wasn't trying to stop him was like kicking a puppy or stealing the proverbial baby's candy. I'm going for a shower, Demetrio growled, still thinking about candy. Knock yourself out, Christiana said. Please do. You first, Demetrio replied. I'm sure you got some pills that'll do the job. He didn't wait for a reply, turning his scratched up back on her and heading into the bathroom. He locked the door behind him. It didn't occur to Demetrio to bend his body like a circus contortionist to try to look at his back in the little beauty mirror above the sink. If it had, he would have seen how bad the scratches were. And then he wouldn't have howled like a cat in heat when the hot water washed over the wounds.
That was the latest instalment of Molha Branca by myself, Dane Cobain. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. And this is Charlie Brind with his version of Jerry Reed's Eastbound and Down.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking. We're gonna do what they say can't be done.
It can't be done.
We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. I'm eastbound, just watch your bandit run.
2, 3, 4.
Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking. We're gonna do what they say can't be done. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. I'm eastbound, just watch your bandit run. Keep your foot hard on the pedal, so never mind them brakes. Let it all hang out, cause we got a run to make. The boys are thirsty in Atlanta, and there's beer in Texarkana, and we'll bring it back no matter what it takes. Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking. We're gonna do what they say can't be done.
Can't be done.
We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. Why be eastbound, just watch your bandit run. Come on now, we talk. Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking. We're gonna do what they say can't be done. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. Why be eastbound, just watch your bandit run. Old Smoke Kid's got them ears on, when he's hot up on your trail. Well, he ain't gonna rest till you're in jail. You gotta dodge him, you gotta duck him, you gotta keep that diesel trucking. Just put that hammer down and give it hay. Yeah. Westbound and down, 18 wheels rolling. We're gonna do what they say can't be done.
Can't be done.
We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. I'm westbound, just watch your bandit run. Westbound and down, 18 wheels and rolling. We're gonna do what they say can't be done. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. I'm westbound, just watch your bandit run.
He's a good boy. He's a good old boy. Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly. That was an excerpt of Ballet by Michael Pretorius by Dave Cannings, and before that we had Charlie Bryn with his version of Eastbound and Down by Jerry Reed. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and I'm here in conversation now with the man himself, Dave Cannings.
Well, the first question you may or may not have an answer to, but it's my traditional one. It's what was the last book that you read and what did you think of it?
The last book I read was the Britain AD by Francis Pryor, and it was a brilliant book. It was something that was brought out in 2004, and Channel 4 did a series to go alongside it, and it's a book you can just keep rereading because you learn so much from it, as each time you reread it. So it's great book, really was enthralling, and I think I must be I've had it out of the library about, I don't know, 6 times, so I must have had it about 4 months, and I've reread it about 3 times in that lot.
Awesome. Cool. So obviously today I want to chat to you about music, and I thought a good place to start would be to ask, how long have you been playing guitar and how did you get your start?
Wow. I suppose it goes all the way back to when I was at the beginning of secondary school, and I started sort of knocking around with some friends who were heavily into music, and I just got into listening to all my favorite songs and trying to work out the riffs and chord sequences. And dear old mum and dad bought me one of these horrendous Jedson sort of Fender Telecaster copies with an action that was about 1 inch off the fretboard. So, of course, when I started out, I found it impossible to hold down a barre chord or even some of the sort of, 3-finger chords. But in the end, I managed it, and then went on to get my first proper guitar from the local guitar shop in Guildford. And then I sort of joined the RAF, the Air Force, and first thing I did was to find people who were of a like mind and see if I could get into a band. And I got into a club band, function band, sort of playing working men's clubs and all that sort of stuff. And it took off from there. And that was probably after I'd finished training. I was about 18, I suppose, 17 and a half, 18.
Cool.
I mean, one aside from that was, this airman has to decide. He has to make a decision whether he wants to make a career in the Air Force or he wants to play guitar.
Yeah.
And of course, that was an easy decision to make.
Yeah. Well, and these days, I mean, you're playing classical guitar, and I wondered what's the difference between classical guitar and acoustic guitar?
Okay, so very often with acoustic guitar, you'll find rhythm patterns and strumming patterns that people put together and use that as an accompaniment to singing, or maybe another instrument, usually another electric guitar or something like that. You can get finger picking style, obviously, in acoustic guitar, but classical guitar, obviously on different strings, they are nylon strings, and on the classical guitar, you've got a theme or a melody, if you like, on the top, very often on the top, and then which is played by the fingers, the right hand fingers, and then the thumb plays the bass, and your other fingers fill out the chordal harmony in between the two. So very often, you're playing 2 voices in the mid range, a melody on the top, and a supporting bass underneath.
Yeah. Cool. And what do you think are some of the misunderstandings that people have about classical guitarists and classical guitar music?
Oh, I think one of the easiest misconceptions is that it's all a little bit highbrow. Do you know what I mean? And people get the wrong impression that it's not for the likes of me, because I like music that I can understand and all that sort of stuff. But to be honest, classical guitar you know, can give you a beautiful rendition of Greensleeves, which
Hmm.
is really simple. You know, it's the sort of thing that Simon and Garfunkel used to do in the old days. Um, or Scarborough Fair, for instance, that
Yeah.
Simon and Garfunkel did. And you can make it sound, the classical guitar can, you know, can be so expressive. It can almost sound like two or three people playing at the same time, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, it takes a little bit more sort of dedication, I suppose, to, you know, reach you know, a good intermediate to advanced standard. But
Hmm.
even if you're beginner to intermediate, you can still entertain people, and then it's a great sound. You know, it
Yeah.
shouldn't be dismissed. You know,
Yeah.
it's got a lot to
Well,
offer.
and there's something you mentioned there that I want to follow up with, because you mentioned about how it can be expressive. I wondered, like, how do you think music is able to communicate feelings and messages and things like that without using lyrics?
Oh, there are so many ways. Um, for instance, you'll find in a lot of the Renaissance stuff that I'm doing, you will get to the end of a phrase, and that point of resolution on at the end of the phrase, you can almost sort of leave people hanging, waiting for that sort of that beautiful resolution, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, there's all sorts of, you know, dynamic variations that can be so expressive, you know, with respect to sort of like um, building up the volume level, you know, from the beginning of the phrase to the end of the phrase or midpoint of the phrase where the climax is, and then, you know, sort of tailing off with a nice little tasteful diminuendo, you know, where you get gradually quieter. And also the sort of tone variations, because there's huge numbers of tone variations you can get from, you know, playing with your nails, or
Hmm.
where you can go closer to the bridge and get a slightly sort of harder edged, you know, brittle sound, or you can make the instrument sound almost like a cello if you go towards the neck, you know,
Yeah.
go beyond the sound hole towards the neck. It's just, you know, the sort of interpretive or expressive range is huge, huge.
Yeah. And you mentioned before you used to play for function bands. I mean, how did you go from being I suppose like a popular musician to what into playing classical music?
Yeah, well, that was uh, in a way, I was sort of getting disillusioned with bands sort of starting up and everybody being really enthusiastic, and then all of a sudden, you know, somebody would sort of say, "Oh, sorry guys, I can't afford, you know,
Mm,
to buy a PA. I can't afford to buy this, can't afford to buy that," or actually, you know, so bands would sort of make a great start in the first few months, and then get to the crunch point where you're about to, you know, okay, guys, you know, we're about to go out on the road. Right?
hmm.
Has everybody got their gear? And then it would all fall apart. You know, so I decided from there that I had enough of that, and I was going to do something where I just needed to rely on myself.
Yeah.
And I fell into classical guitar.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose it gives you something a bit different than, if you go to an open mic or something, it's usually people like me, just like somebody with a guitar, like guitar and vocals, often doing those, Oasis covers or Ed Sheeran or whatever. So it's quite nice that you can go along to a night like that and actually, probably be the only classical guitarist there.
Yeah, very often it is. I went to an open mic a couple of months ago, actually, at Great Missenden, the
Hmm.
is it the Black Horse? Is it? I think pub there. And I turned up thinking exactly what you thought, but then, wow, lo and behold, there was another classical guitarist. Nearly fell off my perch. You know,
Yeah.
it was great to see. But you're right, most of the time, you know, I'm there on my Jack Jones, you know, sort of flying the flag for us classical players. You know, but
Yeah.
it's all good, you know. And I have to say, at all the open mics I've, you know, played at, people have been really supportive,
Yeah.
and, you know, give you the time of day and give you a chance. You know.
Awesome. And speaking of performances, so you've got a date coming up. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, yeah. This is my This is my big recital. I haven't done a recital since before COVID. You know,
Hmm.
a lot of things have been going on in my life, so that I suppose organising concerts took a bit of a back seat while I was sorting life out. But
Yeah.
now I feel ready. So this is a concert with music that I'm passionate about. This is Renaissance music. Obviously, a lot of this music was originally written for lute, but it's
Hmm.
been transcribed over for guitar. And it's not just solo guitar. This time around, I've got a special guest coming along, Sasha Tompkins,
Hmm.
who is a wonderful soprano, and we're doing six John Dowland lute songs. John Dowland was like the preeminent lutenist and composer of Elizabethan England,
Hmm.
and we're doing six of his songs. Um, and the rest of the program is sort of, it says Renaissance music from the Renaissance period or music inspired by the Renaissance. So I've taken
Yeah.
a bit of a cheeky curveball there and chosen some modern music that reflects, I suppose, the sentiments of that period, the Renaissance period, even though they were written in the 20th century.
Hmm.
So we'll see what people think of that. But one of them, of course, is called "Temptation of the Renaissance," which is the title of the concert.
Yeah.
So it was a period that tempted people to think outside of the box and strive for new sounds and new ways of writing poetry or music, and even scientific thought. So it's and plus the fact that a good half of the program is music written by Englishmen.
Hmm.
And of course, I think you can't get a better interpretation than somebody playing a piece of music from their own country.
Yeah.
You're listening to The Arch on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with Dave Cannings, and here he is performing an excerpt of If My Complaints.
If my complaints could passions move, or make love sing when I suffer wrong, my passions are enough to prove that
Pavans and galliards were, in the 16th and 17th century, often performed as a pair. The pavan, or pavan, was a slow dance, and the galliard was a much more up-tempo dance, very often danced by the younger members of the crowd. So we have a pavan by Louis Smolan in A minor. And now, a galliard by Anthony Holborn in A minor.
You're listening to The Arch on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and I'm rejoined in conversation now by this week's guest, who is Dave Canning.
When and where is this gig?
Oh, it's at the Arts Centre, big church, the main performance
Hmm.
area, the Wickham Arts Centre. So yeah, looking forward to that. That's on the 28th of September. So
Awesome.
everybody's welcome, and you'll be guaranteed a really intimate and awesome evening.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the sort of the sound of the church space as well. Would you say that's ideal for classical guitar with that nice sort of reverb, that nice big chamber for it?
It is perfect, perfect, because the nice thing about it is that with all that stone on the inside, it almost acts like a foldback speaker for you.
Hmm.
So as you change the tone on your, via your fingernails and the dynamic levels, you get an almost instant response back from
Hmm.
the fabric of the church. It's great, and of course it means that I don't have to be amplified.
Yeah.
The acoustic is so good in there, for acoustic instruments, that even when you play, sort of moderately soft, you can still be heard at the back of the hall.
Yeah.
And Sasha is such an accomplished singer that she's, got the dynamic range of her voice absolutely matching, my guitar levels.
Yeah.
So it should be good.
Yeah. Well, and also I suppose again going back to the, the Renaissance theme, I suppose it's the kind of venue that, you know, it sort of speaks to the music in itself. It's much more appropriate for Renaissance music than say, playing in a 20th century pub or something, you know?
Yes, yeah, you couldn't have put a better point there. I mean, it's a lot of the music written around that time, of course, was played um, in buildings that were made of that sort of
Hmm.
material. Like places like Hampton Court, for instance.
Yeah.
Where Queen Elizabeth would have had all her entertainments. And yeah, local churches would have housed these sort of concerts. So it's a perfect venue,
Yeah.
and it has that lovely feeling when you're unamplified in a big space like that. People get to feel like they're in really a quite intimate space, even though
Hmm.
it's big. It makes it feel as if you're one of two or three people in the room, listening to
Yeah.
this guitar and voice.
Yeah.
So it works really well.
And you mentioned earlier, playing a lot of English composers. I did want to ask which countries' composers are your favorites and why? Is it the English purely because, again, it's your own heritage?
Yeah, partly, but I mean also the French had a big input in that time, and one of the guys that I'm playing, Michael Pretorius, was a German who sort of travelled Europe and collected all these dance instrumentals and compiled them into a huge book
Hmm.
called Terpsichore. And because he was German, obviously he didn't manage to get across to England very much. So it's not just England, but I would have to say, yeah, the English lute scene during Queen Elizabeth I's time and before
Yeah.
her, Henry VIII was just so dynamic and just so beautiful. The way the themes are interwoven, that you can achieve on just one instrument is
Yeah.
gorgeous. You know.
Yeah. And what can you tell us? Because you do classical guitar lessons as well, right? So what can you tell us about those and, how can people get started with it?
Yeah, I've been teaching now for over 35 years. Classical guitar lessons, you start off with very simple sort of right hand finger work, and you sort of like quickly progress to, getting two lines of music going with one hand, and then you're off and running.
Hmm.
It's simple as that. But I mean, the thing is, the nice thing about classical guitar is that you've got these days many people arranging pop tunes for classical
Mm.
guitar. So you'll
Yeah.
get Beatles standards. I mean, I've arranged myself personally, I've arranged one of the Black Eyed Peas songs. Oh
Nice.
my God, what's that? Oh, for
Where
goodness
is the
sake!
love is the only one I can
No,
think
no,
of.
no, no. The very first famous one. Da, 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 da,
I
da,
can't
da.
remember.
Oh my God. It will come to me, of course, when we finish the interview. But you
Yeah.
can put that in, can't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, classical guitar is so versatile and sort of malleable. And yeah, very quickly. And for instance, I've also arranged that Tears for Fears song, "Everybody Wants to Rule the World."
Yeah.
Now that's another great one that you can arrange, where you can get that lovely that rocking bass going, and then the tune over the top of the chords as well.
Yeah. Awesome. And I'm dying to ask this one. Are there any pieces you've never been able to master, but you really want to?
Yes, and though I will never say never, because um, when I've got an ambition, I just allot a little bit of extra time to it.
Hmm.
And one of my favorites is the Sonata Opus 47 by Alberto Ginastera. He's an Argentinian composer, and he wrote this sonata for uh, Roberto Alcel, who's a fabulous player, again Argentinian, and he
Hmm.
commissioned it. And wow, it is full of Latin American fireworks, you know. And I've got to be able to play that one day. I'm going to give that. I'm going to give that a try.
Awesome. Cool. And just to end on, really, so what's next for you, and where can people go to find out more? So, you know, if you want to plug your show, your recital again, and yeah, where can people find out more?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, and I've got Dave Cannings Music, so you can follow Dave Cannings Music. Um, I'm also playing fairly regularly these days at the open mics at the Bellevue in
Hmm.
Wickham, the Arts Centre open mics as well, of course, in High Wycombe. I've recently gone to the Black Horse over at Great Missenden. I also regularly go to the Bell at Princess Risborough. I'll be looking to probably get my nose in at the Garibaldi,
Hmm.
which I think is, where's that? Bourne End or
Born
Headson?
End. Yeah, it's Born End.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll be looking to, and also I'll be playing at HMV in High Wycombe soon,
Cool.
because I have a duet partner. So there'll be classical guitar duet. We'll be looking to get ourselves in at the HMV when they start putting their Saturday afternoon um, live performances on.
Big thank you to Dave Cannings for joining me. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Dave Cannings performing an excerpt of Now Oh Now.
Now, oh now, I needs must part, parting though I'm absent long. Absence can no joy impart. Joy once fled cannot return.
He sank half the bottle for breakfast, neglecting his lukewarm cup of tea. He excused himself from the office, blaming issues with his sickly family. He said it ain't easy being me. He said it ain't easy being me. She awoke as the sun it was setting, head pounding with familiarity. The stranger's warmth she found fleeting. Her jaw, it was aching terribly. She said it ain't easy being me. She said it ain't easy being me. They passed the bag between them, making the best use of their keys. Before the polythene was empty, they both asked for a promise to keep. Please make it easy. Can you make it easier for me? Please make it easy. Can you make it easier for me? 'Cause I can't take no more. My eyes are red and raw, but I can see we're in too deep. C'est tragique. One day I won't suffer. One day I'll be free. I hate to act the victim, but I play the role so gloriously. 'Cause it ain't easy. It ain't easy being me. It ain't easy, it ain't easy being me.
That was C'est Tragique by Bert Honor, and before that we had Dave Cannings with his version of Now Oh Now, or his excerpt from it at least. You're listening to The Archer on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to head over to the Yorkshire now to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
Melanie, Candles in the Rain, an LP I bought from the British Heart Foundation in High Wycombe for £2. Melanie Safka was the hippie Taylor Swift. She was everywhere at the time. She played all the big festivals, easy to mic up, just one guitar expertly finger-picked, and one haunting voice. She was probably comparatively cheap for the promoters. Apparently her mother gave her a lift to Woodstock, and she carried her guitar on her back with no case, and not even a gunny sack. She had an unusual voice, not an obvious female pop star voice, but almost the opposite. More Neil Young than Lulu. A raspy, lived-in kind of voice, with a charming, faltering vibrato that somehow seemed to be at odds with her youthful elfin beauty. She was on Jules Holland a few years ago, and the voice and beauty have aged perfectly. It could be a powerful voice. She took the Rolling Stones' Ruby Tuesday, and she makes you feel she would really miss her, as she erupts with emotion to a massive backing track that verges on being over the top. She was not my kind of thing at the time, but I was okay with Ruby Tuesday and her other song that got a lot of radio play, Look What They've Done to My Song Ma, which had an oompa beat and would not have been out of place being sung by Liza Minnelli in Cabaret. On Look What They've Done to My Song, Ma, she really does sound disappointed with the outcome of her efforts. So much so that she complains in 2 different languages. The thing that put me off Melanie was her song Brand New Key. It was so ubiquitous that the Wurzels did a successful comedy version of it. I've got a brand new combine harvester. And we have the nerve to call them the good old days. But they really do not make records like that anymore. I bought this album partly because it was a real bargain, partly because it does not have Brand New Key, but mostly because it has Lay Down Candles in the Rain with the Edwin Hawkins singers. I was not aware of this song at the time, otherwise I would have given Melanie more attention. I either found it on a compilation or was directed to it on YouTube. I know it would have been in the last 10 years, and I cannot understand how I missed it. It is the ultimate pop gospel song, very uplifting. The Edwin Hawkins singers had previously had a hit with Oh Happy Day. There is also a cover of James Taylor's Carolina on My Mind, as you would expect on such an LP. The songs take her simple guitar picking and add drums, electric bass and lots of strings. Also, exactly as you would expect. Overall, I found it a pleasurable listening experience and well worth the £2. I was charmed by her song The Citiest People, which uses a deliberately naive use of words to great effect. I was probably expecting something whimsical and folky, but in places this album totally rocks. There is nothing like Brand New Key to cringe about. It has a gatefold sleeve with the lyrics printed in a typewriter style font, so I listened with the sleeve in my hand reading the lyrics, just like I would have in my teenage bedroom. There were boys in my class at school that loved Melanie, and I thought they were wet and weedy and needed toughing up. But I can now see it was not just about teenage kicks.
Big thank you to Twang and Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to Dave Cannings for being this week's guest. Thank you to everyone whose music I've shared. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. We are repeat on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And you can find us on Facebook if you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound. You should be able to find us. You can also reach out to me here at the studio by dropping me a line on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. So I'm going to leave you with one last tune, and this is the Sepia Tone Folk Collective with I'm Not Really Here. I'll catch you next week.
Life can seem a vicious game, and you know love is just the same. Lay down your cards, give it a try. Can you see the girl with me? Well, she ain't my property, just don't come and ask me why. I'm tired of all their prying eyes, and I'm bored of all the lies and the gossip that I hear. I'll sage love songs just for you, lyrics you can misconstrue and hear what you want to hear. I gave you what I had inside, then watched you take me for a ride, though I tried to be sincere. I'm tired of your lying eyes, and I'm bored of all the sighs and the tears when you're near. But if you're ever feeling down, you know I'll always be around. I can't seem to stay away, so go. You must let go of my hand. You're not my woman, I'm not your man. There's a kindness being cruel. You know your heart played by the rules, then it's me that feels the fool. I'm sick and tired of my disguise, so I'll just say my goodbyes and then slowly disappear. 'Cause I'm not really here, 'cause I'm not really here, I'm not really here.
Up late at night again. The internet's my only friend, and I know that she wants to know me. Yeah, she does. Someone stealing from my secretive dreams, as decent as they seem. And she says she knows my name, and she knows just what that means. Yeah, she does. Yeah, she does. Getting drunk on whiskey and gin, knocking doors until she lets me in, and I see that she wants to see me. Yeah, she does. She says she's sick of the same old man, and I forgot the words on stage again. And she knows that she's all alone, and she knows just